What's going on, Houdat Nation? Welcome in to another episode of Saints Daily, your home for everything to do with the black and gold. My name is Tim, and let's get right into it. Heading into the draft, Mickey Loomis basically said that what the Saints do during this draft could impact Alvin Kamara and Cam Jordan. Not just what the Saints' plans for both those players are, but what both of those players' plans might be with the Saints afterwards. After the draft, the only addition to the running back room was a undrafted free agent out of Ohio State. So, based off of that, you have to start wondering, is Alvin Kamara in the plans for the Saints in 2026? We've already talked about his contract situation. If he is coming back, I do think you still have to revisit his contract. The cap hit is a little bit too high. I don't know if it's a straight up pay cut or a restructure or what needs to happen. But I do think that if Kamara is coming back, that is the main hurdle that still needs to be crossed at this point in time. But again, this is a team that didn't draft a running back. They brought in C.J. Donaldson out of Ohio State, and his college numbers were okay. If you have a running back in college, you probably want him a little bit higher. But in 4 years, three with WVU, one with Ohio State, he had 517 carries for 2,400 yards and 40 touchdowns. So definitely someone who gets a lot of touchdowns, which is obviously good for any team. But overall, not a running back that you're going to be getting an undrafted free agent to replace Kamara. This is a guy who might not even make the roster, just realistically. You have Estime, Neal, Kamara, and Achan, who are probably all set to most likely make the roster, at least based off of last year and draft status. Kamara really being the only question mark from that group. You also brought in the running back Ty Chandler from the Vikings, who might help and contribute in special teams capacity. So even though it's more special teams based, that's another player at that position that may get in the way of a CJ Donaldson joining this team. For Cam Jordan, it's a little bit different. You did go and get a defensive tackle in the second round, which I don't think impacts Cam's status with this team whatsoever. But you did trade a fifth round pick to get Tyree Wilson, who is a former seventh overall pick a few years ago from the Vegas Raiders. Now, Wilson has 12 career sacks in that time frame. He's not somebody who's coming in to replace Cam Jordan by any means. He's not the same kind of player, but it is the same position. So you do have to start wondering at that point, is this the end of the Cam Jordan saga in New Orleans? Because we are starting to see a team bring in players like Tyree Wilson and potentially plan to not have Cam on this team. The main difference between Cam and Kamara, obviously, is that Cam doesn't have a contract right now, and Kamara does. Cam, apparently, based off of all reporting, does have a contract on the table to sign, and I don't think it's gone away yet. But to the point of what Mickey Loomis said, where this draft may impact what they want to do with the Saints. And that's the part that I'm looking at right now. Does Cam Jordan maybe want to come back at this point, knowing that he's definitely going to be a third, fourth edge, maybe only a third down pass rusher, which gets him those sacks, but a lot less playing time, which is kind of what he did last year. But regardless, I could see him wanting to get paid like a two instead of a three or four edge rotational piece. And I don't think you pay him to be a two if you're only going to have him be rotational. With that being said, on the Matthew Paris, Jordan did say that nobody was brought in that produced the way I did last year, so my talent speaks for itself. And if things work out, phenomenal. I've always said I understand the business side of it, so I've never worried about it. Those words to me sound like a guy who has mentally prepared that he might not be with this team moving forward. Um, it's gonna be wild. It's gonna be very wild if you don't have Demario Davis and you don't have Cam Jordan losing both in the same offseason. But let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think the Saints are moving on from either of these players, both of them, or do you expect them both back? Is it based off of gut feeling, what they did during the draft, or what you're hearing in the news? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're doing that, we'll talk about what the predictions are, at least in terms of, again, loving to look at the FanDuel DraftKings lines. I think those are the best lines to always look at, right? To kind of level set where a fan base might be, is where the people who get paid a ton of money to draw lines up see those teams. I always like to preface these segments by saying I am not a gambling expert. I am not providing gambling advice. I should never be somebody who provides gambling advice because my FanDuel account has always been not in the positives, right? So don't take my advice. These are just the numbers and my opinion. So FanDuel right now has the Saints odds to win the division at plus 340, which is last still. And the Saints odds to win the Super Bowl are plus 10,000, again, last in the division. They have the win total at 6.5. So again, a good step back at what the public narrative is of this team. That even after a draft that a lot of people are saying was a successful draft, whether it's because Shuck is still too young and too inexperienced to basically make any bets on, the division maybe getting a little bit better around them. Whatever the reasoning is, the Saints, at least on FanDuel, are still not expected to make the playoffs and have an over/under line of 6.5 wins. For DraftKings, the odds are a little better, plus 255, which is second to win the division. Odds to win the Super Bowl are plus 8,000, and a 7.5 over/under line for wins. So a little bit better, but still not a winning season is being projected by either of these two sports books. And the reason, again, why I like to bring up the sports books is because as a fan, it is so easy to get tunnel vision on just what your team's done. The Panthers have gotten better. They're also still not projected to be the first team in the division. So it's a little interesting that both of the teams I think that ended the season the strongest in the division are still not projected to win it, especially after I think they are the two teams that did get the best out of all the other teams in the division. But it's a good level set. It's a good step back that this is still year two of a full teardown rebuild. This team was not supposed to be potentially a playoff team 1 year after the rebuild started. This time last year, everybody was saying, all right, give us 2, 3 years, we'll be back, we'll be back. And we're already having a lot of the fan base, a lot of the media, a lot of people starting to say, are the Saints going to win the division? Are they going to make the playoffs? Are they going to be picking, top 20 next year instead of top 10? And it's exciting. And I understand the excitement, but you do have to take a look at the strength of schedule down the stretch with the note of this team was also very hurt. So, yeah, the strength of schedule wasn't great, but a lot of the starters were also out. In 2026, the Saints had the second easiest strength of schedule based off of 2025 records. So it isn't expected to get much more difficult. If I was a betting man, I think I would probably take the over on the wins. I don't think I'd be betting on the Saints to win the Super Bowl, but I wouldn't be surprised to see this team win the division. I do think I'd still give the edge to the Panthers, who won it last year and seem to have only gotten better in pretty much every aspect of their team. I like the head coach that they have. I like the fact that he can make a quarterback like Bryce Young look better. Another year in the system's only going to be better for that entire team and that franchise. So, yes, I think the Saints have a shot, but I want to bet them to win the division over the Panthers just yet. I do think it's a little bit interesting that the Buccaneers, who kind of imploded last year, who didn't get rid of their head coach and brought in the offensive coordinator that the Falcons fired, uh, is the team that's projected to win the division more than anybody. But again, I'm not an expert in this field. There's a good reason why these sports books have these numbers the way they have them. They know more than I do, so just take all of what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But it's always a good level set just to remind everybody, hey, yes, it's exciting, but let's not get too far ahead. We are still in year two of a rebuild. This might take another year or two, but we are definitely seeing a team on the upswing. All right, I want to quickly pivot over back to the draft and talk about why the Saints may have targeted wide receivers so much in this draft. And yes, that was to the detriment of getting another corner or another edge or another player that could help the defense out when there is still an Alontae Taylor sized hole on the defense. But last year, week 18, let me just read you the numbers in case you forgot. Receiving numbers for the Saints on week 18 of last year. Audric Estime, 5 receptions for 43 yards. Dante Pettis, 5 receptions, 60 yards. Kevin Austin, 4 receptions on 9 targets, 37 yards. Taysom Hill, 3 receptions, 32 yards. Jawan Johnson, 3 receptions, 61 yards. Ronnie Bell, 2 receptions, 23 yards, and a touchdown. And then Samori Torre, 1 reception for 3 yards. I think that might be why the Saints targeted wide receivers so heavily. Getting Tyson is something that is going to help this team out in the immediate future. Getting a guy like Lance, who can definitely be a deep threat out the gate while he refines his route running and maybe becomes an all around threat later on, I think is really worth the fourth round investment. I don't know how he fell in the fourth round. A lot of mocks that I saw him in were having him go bottom of the second, early third. So the Saints getting him in the fourth, at least on a consensus board ranking, was a steal. We'll see if that actually plays out that way. But the Saints love their RAS scores, and he was an RAS behemoth in the offseason. So I think it's a good pick, a high ceiling pick, and a player that I actually really do like. And then you see some of the other picks, right? The team did bring in the wide receiver out of LSU. He's more likely going to be a return man. I don't think that Barry Brown is being brought in to take receiver snaps outside of maybe a few trick plays or a few wide receiver screens. He's being brought in to help the special teams unit. So when you're saying that they're targeting the wide receiver group, I've seen this a lot during really the last weekend where people were saying that the Saints really targeted wide receiver and they left all these other positions out to dry because of it. They did get 2 people for wide receiver snaps, but I think Barry Brown was being brought in mostly to be a returner and a gunner. It's an area that we really saw this team struggle with last year. I think the return game needed a lot of help, and yeah, you did bring in Ty Chandler for kickoff returns and potentially punt returns, but you can get an ace, somebody who had a ton of return touchdowns in his college career. Pair him up with Lorenzo Styles Jr., the corner safety, previous former wide receiver, converted defensive back from Ohio State. Now you have 2 people who can be your gunners, who can be return men, and can really split duties based off of how the season goes, and have 2 people who, if one gets hurt, you actually have a backup returner. It's an area where this team's really struggled since Shaheed started getting offensive snaps. I know it's something a lot of people like to say it's an area of struggle since Shaheed left, but really once Shaheed started getting offensive snaps, his production as a returner did go down a little bit, and that's historically a trend that I think exists. I don't know for sure. I just remember seeing players like Devin Hester get involved in the offense and all of a sudden not be as good of a returner, and then whenever they take him out of those trick plays on offense, he's a good returner again. Whether it's them saving themselves for offense, whatever is going on behind the scenes there does impact it. And having people on this team that are specifically supposed to be returners, at least out the gate, is definitely something I'm happy this team is starting to do. So yes, they did target receiver, and yes, they did bring a lot of receivers in for top 30 visits, so maybe this is a team that's going to telegraph their picks moving forward. That's not something you really saw Sean Payton or Dennis Allen do, but I do like what Kellen Moore basically said whenever he was asked about the top 30 visits, where it's everybody knows. The players are going to tell every other team that they visit who they're visiting with. Everybody in the NFL knows. Maybe not everybody, all the fans knows, or everybody in the media might not know, but everybody knows. So why hide it? Just if you want to look at 10 wide receivers, bring 10 wide receivers in. Everybody already is going to know around the league who you're visiting with. So making it a secret at this point is just it's not really something you need to do, right? There's the famous story of Sean Payton wanting to get Patrick Mahomes. Nobody in the media or no fans knew that that was Sean Payton's plan. Somehow the Chiefs knew that that was Sean Payton's plan because they traded up to get him in front of the Saints. And it was a story from the Chiefs that I saw a couple years ago where a coach literally told them, "Hey, if we want him, we have to jump the Saints." everybody knows when it comes to top 30 visits. So maybe they did telegraph it a little bit, but again, I'm liking that this regime isn't trying to take all this extra effort to be secretive when it maybe benefits you less than 1% of the time. Sticking with the draft, I do want to go over my favorite picks of the draft class. We did talk about one. I am a very, very big Bryce Lance fan after I watched this tape, after I looked at his measurables. I'm not saying he's going to be better than Tyson because I don't think he will be, but he is somebody who I think is going to set this team up with a very deep wide receiver core moving forward. And as much as I also do like Vele, you have to wonder what this means for Vele or Olave's future with this team. Um, he's a very fast physical runner. He seems to have good ball skills. Somebody out of those four can't be on this team long term, and I don't think it's the two rookies. So the fact that Olave doesn't have a contract yet does make me wonder, is this draft class not just the 2026 wide receiver group? Is this draft class also potentially replacing Chris Olave depending on how the rookies do this year? Olave does have injury concerns. Tyson has injury concerns. Vele at this point has injury concerns. So it's just a question that I'm starting to ask myself is, what does this look long term for Chris Olave's future with the Saints? And is this draft a kind of a sign that, hey, maybe Olave might not be part of this team's future? I hope not. I really think Chris Olave is a wide receiver one in this league. He's coming off a second team All Pro. He's got a great connection with Shuck, and you want to build around that whenever you have that young quarterback. But it's definitely a question that I have to ask myself. And my second favorite pick, it's hard because I did want Max Clare so bad in this draft, but it's hard to not like what Oscar Delp might be able to do for this team. Um, Very good athlete, very underrated pass catcher. He was underused and underutilized in the Georgia offensive scheme, and the more that you watch some of his tape, the more you realize that what he does on film actually seems like it might translate into the NFL in terms of reading a defender and breaking off routes the way that you're supposed to break them off. Um, he seemed to run that seam route, that famous Jimmy Graham seam route that always was popular here in New Orleans with Marcus Colston and Jimmy Graham and everything. He seems to run that very well. I don't know if he's someone I'm putting all my eggs in that basket for, but having a tight end who can be also known for being a good blocker is kind of like that Foster Moreau role that he's going to pick, but he's a more athletic Foster Moreau. So I'm very optimistic on that pick as well. As always, though, please let me know in the comments who your favorite picks were. I am very interested, now that the dust has settled, what Who Dat Nation thinks of the draft class and who your favorite picks are. Sneaky pick is Jeremiah Wright. I do want to go into him a little bit more. He seems like he's got a very, very high ceiling. He's not refined yet, but if this offensive line coaching staff can fix him up, I really like his ceiling. He's got a lot of room to grow, but he definitely seems like he's one of those players that may be a big steal moving forward. But yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think of the draft, who your favorite picks were, and where you think this means for the veterans on this team. Kamara Jordan, who's not on the team right now, but might be coming back and is synonymous with the Saints. What this might mean for Olave or Vele, or who might be the wide receiver on this roster that is potentially going to have to be moved on from. Let me know in the comments below what you think. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, press subscribe, drop us a like, and share it with your friends, and we'll catch you next time.